All right, it's 1 o'clock. So I think I'm going to open this up. So welcome to our Steps for Success webinar. This is the first in a series of 4. We're going to have one of these on a quarterly basis, one in June, one in September, one in December. And they're all going to be on different topics. 2 are going to be more for managers and 2 are going to be more for producers. So we'll have one on green screens, one on streaming, and one on social media besides this one. I'm really happy to introduce Daniel, who is our sponsor today. He's with Municipal Captioning, and he's going to enlighten us over a period of 5 minutes on, I don't know what topic. So take it away,
Boy,
Daniel.
now that you say enlighten, I feel like I should have more valuable information than what I was going to share. So I guess I'll do as quick as I can about the company and about captioning options in a real quick way. And then I have some other stuff I want to talk about, being that it is the spring of 2021. So real fast, municipal captioning, been around now like 3.5 years. I think we've helped maybe about 20 cities and stations add closed captioning hardware or automated captions or set them up with human captioning. We worked with the city of Detroit this last year and the city of San Jose. And then my last 2 large sales were actually in Wisconsin. So Trempealeau County added captioning, and actually earlier than that, we did a system in Kansas for Salina. So, and then the very last thing we did at the end of the year that I should talk about is in addition to doing the captioning, we did for Wausau, we did a brand new cablecast playback system. So had been focusing entirely on captioning, but a lot of folks still ask me about playback because I had done that for about a decade and a half before doing captioning. And so made the decision to kind of start up a little division to do things beyond captioning for PEG. Just in the process of starting that up, got mock-ups of the graphics for it, but at the moment it's being called Gov Meeting Makeover. Trying to give it kind of a home improvement TV show vibe. But I've got a lot of consultants and engineers that I've worked with for over the years. I've been helping with captioning, but are also great for helping people if they want to figure out how to upgrade the playback or change their meetings. Sorry, my computer is still taking phone calls while I shouldn't be. If they wanted to add hybrid options to their meetings, if they wanted to transition back from pandemic times into something that isn't entirely virtual or entirely in person. I've got a bunch of folks who have done that for their own stations and are happy to help us add that as a consultancy or to help people implement physically, come out and integrate if they want to add things like hybrid features or just sell equipment. So still focusing mostly on the captioning, but doing things that are helping with meetings outside of captioning now as well. And then the last thing I want to talk about real fast, put in my notes here and took up almost everything for it. So I'm starting a campaign. I've been starting this for the last couple of months. I just haven't really formally announced it too much, but 50 years of public access campaign, celebrating the fact that you could tie it to spring 1971 if you really want to. The first real high school commencement coverage is in 71. The Video Freaks starting equivalent of public access in New York. A lot of other cities doing things at that time. I actually, just a couple minutes before this, downloaded Radical Software magazine from spring 1971, where they outline a working model of community television and talk about all the places first trying it out and have a working side-by-side comparison of all the different porta packs and the pros and cons. So I'm of the opinion that if you want to pick a time to celebrate 50 years of public access, it's this moment right now as we're coming out of a long, cold year. So starting a 50 years of public access campaign. One of the things we're doing for that is kind of putting up the equivalent of like a football pool where everybody can pick, you know, a spot on the board. And I'm gonna have a spreadsheet where everyone can choose a year. And the first 50 places that choose a year will then get in, you're not running, everybody will get gifts, but we're gonna make little stickers and magnets and giveaways and do fun stuff for all the 50 stations who sign up claiming a year. So all you have to do is then upload an image. It doesn't even have to be video, it could just be an image, screenshot, something with your phone from video from that year. So if somebody has something going all the way back to the 70s or the 80s in their archive, grab one of those years or grab 2015 or 18 or whatever. Because my last 2 sales of 2020 were to places in Wisconsin, and it's the profits from that that I decided to spend on getting the graphics done and getting stickers and things made. I'm opening it up to Wisconsin first, so I'm going to get you guys all access. You can claim all the years that you want before I open up to the other 49 states. So that's my announcement now. We're going to do 50 years of public access, little giveaways. I don't know exactly what will get made, but definitely some stickers and magnets and keychains and doodads.
Well, I know Stoughton's really proud of how far back they go. So they for sure will want to participate in this. The question will be whether or not they still have the video.
We might end up having to grab it still for some things, because I doubt there's much. Although you never know what you'll find on YouTube.
Yeah.
I know that they showed in the not too distant past a Sentinel Mai parade from, I think, 1972.
See? Wow. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, it's actually remarkable that anything being documented from back then even got kept. You know what I mean? Like the amount of tapes that were being reused. I mean, even in the commercial world. So anyway, that's my big announcement. Municipal captioning, more than happy to help anybody with captioning, always offering a discount on top of the full price, standard price. And then similarly, offering to help anything you need, playback systems, meetings, always willing to take trade-ins of old equipment and do whatever I can to make it affordable and easy, and bring in engineers from anywhere we need to help. So that's the big thing. And then of course, 50 years of public access. Hooray. So,
all right. Excellent.
I'm done now.
Thank you, Daniel. So my plan here is to do a really fast overview of PEG issues and basic PEG. I'm glad so many of you are here. This is sort of something very, very close to my heart. It's something that I always want to talk about, and sometimes when we hold these conferences, it's the kind of thing that gets dropped from the list because there isn't enough interest in some of these issues. So what I want to do is basically do a big overview of PEG issues, and in order to make this a little bit more responsive to what your particular interests are, is there anything that you want to tell me right up front that you have a burning interest in, or maybe there's a hot issue in your town, or something that you really, really want to make sure that I cover, so that I can bend the presentation your way a little bit more? So if any of you want to bring something up right at the outset that you want me to be sure to cover, let me know at this point.
I have some.
Okay.
Larry.
Yep.
And when I looked at the agenda, I don't know if you're going this direction or not, but I want to learn how to develop a stronger schedule. I know it's dependent upon content and all this kind of thing, but how do you structure throughout the day programs that work well for your audience?
Okay. Yeah, that's an excellent question to talk. It's not where I was planning to go, but if we have time, what we could maybe do is get some feedback from other people when we're in that general area of the top of the talk. But yes, so okay, I've got it down. Advice for best lighting in studio. Whew. Okay, that is definitely not where I was gonna go. Again, I'll put it down. Maybe we can throw that out to the crowd. Anything else?
Mary, if you could maybe touch on funding issues, especially in Wisconsin, that would be very helpful to me.
As in like the franchise fee? Okay.
Yes,
I
please.
do have kind of a Wisconsin-centric set of piece of information at the very end, because we do have people from around the Midwest here. We've got Mike Wiza from Stevens Point, Jake Tim from Oshkosh, Lisa Wolf from Columbus, Will Nimmo from Monona, Dave Grumman from Lake Mills, Jim Knightright from Chicago, Jim Weingard from Rice Lake, John Elke from West Bend, Daniel Carpenter from Edina, Minnesota, David Danielson from West Dallas, Liz Burkle-Iletti from Omaha, Scott Mueller from Sheboygan, Greg Stevens from Salina, and Kevin Bargender from Wisconsin Rapids. So that's who's enrolled today. So I will spend a little bit on Wisconsin because most of us are from Wisconsin, but I didn't want to go too far into that and end up boring the people from outside of Wisconsin. Okay, so yes, so I really tailored this session to be more of a PEGS basic. Things that maybe you never learned when you came into the field and things that you really should know. So I'm going to share my screen. All right, can you see that?
Yeah, you're in, you want to put it in like, start the slideshow? Try that once. Yep.
All right, finally, thank God. I am so sorry. That was the one thing that I wasn't really confident about. Okay, so here we go. All right, what I want to talk about is these things. And again, this is basic stuff, but I think everybody who's involved in PEG management should know about it. The rights of franchising authorities, the differences between PEG, the policies, controversial programming, candidates for office, underwriting versus advertising, ASCAP rights, fair use, interesting media statistics, and then I have Wisconsin issues. So that's what's on the table today. So first of all, who decides who programs a PEG channel? And under federal law, it's the franchising authority. And the franchising authority, who is a municipality typically, may request PEG channels from the cable operator during a franchise negotiation. And normally that has to be backed up by a needs assessment so you can justify why you want those PEG channels. In Wisconsin, of course, we don't have negotiations on the local level anymore, but for those of you who do, that's how you get them. In Wisconsin, what happened is the state grandfathered the number of PEG channels a municipality had at the time Act 42 was passed in 2007. So the other thing about the franchising authority, they get to determine who manages a channel and who gets a channel. So the basic difference between a PEG fee and a franchise fee is that a PEG fee is earmarked for PEG equipment and facilities. And so for those states who still have PEG fees, and Wisconsin is not one of them, it's a wonderful thing because it must be spent on PEG equipment and facilities. There was a time when franchise agreements were negotiated with cable operators, and these PEG fees were also able to be used for operating. We had a few of those in Wisconsin. California largely did this, but recently the courts have disallowed the use of PEG fees for operating. So that left a lot of centers with real problems as a result. In Wisconsin, we haven't had PEG fees since 2011. So we have relied entirely on a PEG fee, and to back up, if you're really green, a PEG fee then would be something that subscribers would pay monthly. So normally in Wisconsin, it was maybe 15 cents or 50 cents. Some centers got $1 a month from subscribers, but that's how a PEG fee is gotten. Sometimes a PEG fee was even allocated for the purchase of certain capital equipment. And after that capital equipment was paid off, then the PEG fee ended. A franchise fee, though, is a right-of-way fee. It's what municipalities are paid for the use of their streets. And Congress envisioned that this fee would be used for operating expenses for PEG, regulation of the cable company, and anything else they want to spend it on. Now, under 1984 Cable Act, it capped franchise fees at 5%. And recently the FCC has said, well, what's capped at 5% is all in-kind and fees. So right now, if you're in a state that actually still requires in-kind support, the cable company can compute how much that in-kind support is worth and deduct it from the franchise fee you get. In Wisconsin, we've recently, in 2019, had a cap put on franchise fees of 4%, and we don't get any in-kind support. So we just don't care. So, but franchise fees can be used for anything. They do not have to be used for PEG. And I think I already went over this slide.
Hey, Mary, I have a question. Do
Yes.
you want us to hold the questions or ask
No,
them?
please ask them as I'm going along.
So is the in-kind category in effect now, or has that been delayed by the FCC and courts?
No, I believe that is in effect now. It's a good question. I will double check on that. But that order it's already been published, and I don't think there was any delay on that. But I will double check that. That's a good question. Start making a little list. I think that what they did grapple with a little bit was exactly how that transition would happen. And there was some talk about, giving municipalities and cable operators some time to come to an understanding. But I would have to look into that a little bit more for you. Okay. All right, the difference between a public education and government access channel. So first of all, they're all managed as local non-commercial channels. The difference is who is responsible for the programming. Now, I just want to do a quick sidebar about the non-commercial business. This is a little bit controversial. Traditionally, PEG has been managed as a non-commercial channel. In the Cable Act, it says that there are leased commercial channels, and then there are the PEG channels. And so there's always been this assumption that PEG should be non-commercial. But there have been some court cases where they've indicated that advertising might be allowed or some commercial programming might be allowed. But in the end, my impression in the field is that people have not gone in that direction. And, just by and large, we run them as non-commercial entities. So, public access. Public access centers are managed as a public forum. That is, it allows anyone to come and use the facility with certain restrictions, which we'll get into a little later. The producers control the content of shows and hold the copyright, as opposed to the facility or the media center. There are rules for the use of the facility and the channel, but they're not content-based. They're time, place, and manner restrictions. And you can impose some restrictions around the idea of community standards, such as playing a show after 11 o'clock at night, that kind of thing. Educational and government, a school or a local government decides how to use the channel, and they control the content, and then they're responsible for the content. So that's the main difference between the two. So public access is generally used by nonprofits, churches, individuals with a point of view, musicians and artists, students, school-age kids, and seniors. Seniors, I think, are a really fun part of public access because it allows people who are retired to still keep their hand in their community and contribute and find out what's going on. I think seniors really enjoy being a part of public access, as are students, because especially if they're interested in the field, they have an opportunity to work firsthand for a television station. Okay, educational access, school board meetings and events, programs requested by administrators, the school board, and teachers. So, these people have an access to this channel that I think is very important to respect. Student-produced programming, academic programming. Sometimes a school district will subscribe to a service that provides programming on certain topics, the arts, etc. Sports, football, baseball, whatever kids are doing, arts, choir concerts, band concerts, programs helpful to parents, and recognition. Government meetings, programs requested by local government departments, programs requested by the mayor or council members, coverage of events and organizations that are partly funded by the local government, candidates for office if you provide them equal opportunity, and promotion of community events and government events. So these generally are in a priority order, and I think I get into that. I guess I'll get into that a little bit later. Okay, so who can manage a PEG channel? Government access, it's going to be a municipality or a county or a park district. Educational access, typically school districts, colleges, universities. Public access, a nonprofit, a local government, school districts, libraries, or even a private contractor in agreement with the city. And if you only have one channel, you can run different types of access. You can have a public access component and a government access component. For example, you can split it by day or even hours of the day. So it can be done, but it's really important if you do that you do it in a very clear manner so that the viewers also understand when something is being sponsored by the government and when something is a public access program. Can a franchising authority choose to use a PEG channel only for government access? Yes. So the franchising authority can do whatever it wants with its PEG channel as long as it's in one of those silos, public, education, or government. They can do whatever they want. You just want to make sure that whatever they do, it isn't against a local cable agreement or a city ordinance. You might want to check those before you change a status. If our city decides to manage a public access channel, do we have to supply production equipment? No. So a public access center could simply offer channel time, but I think that that kind of a passive model is not going to net a lot of users. So what you really, really want is an active, broad outreach plan to the community to bring all kinds of people into your center. You want to use volunteer production assistants because there's just no way you can serve the needs of a community with a single staff person or even a handful of staff people. There's just simply too much work. You really need to develop volunteer production assistants. You could emphasize training to use the kinds of tools they have themselves, like iPads and smartphones and other prosumer type tools. So in that sense, you could not supply the production equipment, but you could offer a lot of training to use it. And then maybe people could come in and use some desktop editing equipment. You know, typically a public access center does offer some access to a facility. Now, if you're sharing one channel and you have government on your channel and education and public, you know, maybe just saying to the public component, we'll play your program, that would work, but that would be very, very limited public access. Is it important to have written policies? Yes. So this is my baby. I really always emphasize to people the importance of having written policies, because, you know, if you don't and you're running an access center by the seat of your pants, you are going to end up in trouble someday. So it contributes to a smooth running facility. If people have questions about what they can do or why can't they do this or that, you can always point to your rules and say, this is why. It diffuses a lot of conflict. It's both guidance for managers and protection for them, so that, again, they can point to the rules and say, I'm sorry, I can't do that because. It diffuses controversial programming flare-ups. So what's really important here is that your rules are very well known. That will help you when there's a controversial programming issue that comes up. But again, you know, if you, and I talk about this a little farther down, if they're approved by a city council or a cable commission, and you know, there's buy-in community-wide, it's been passed, and then your city manager comes to you and says, I don't want you to play that particular plan commission meeting because I look bad. You can point to the rules and say, I'm sorry, once we decide to air the plan commission meetings, my rules forbid me from, you know, censoring any particular meeting, you know, and this was passed by the council. You know, you really need that protection, not only from public access producers who may do something very interesting on camera, but also sometimes your elected officials who try to push you into doing something that you know you really shouldn't be doing. It's also a protection from being sued. So if you don't have rules, what you're doing is you're basically giving the channel to a manager and saying, put whatever you want on that channel. And the manager might start doing content-based decisions. And then you could end up getting sued if you're a public access center. So it's really a protection also from the whims of a manager, so that the manager can't utilize the channel in, you know, just the way he wants to. I just want to mention to you, if any of you are raising your hand or something like that, I can't see it. So if you do have a question, just you know, just interrupt me verbally, because I don't think I can see if you have a question, if you write it down. Okay. What policies cover in a government access station? The programming priority. So who is on the top of the hill here? And it's typically the mayor. You know, whatever the mayor wants, the mayor gets in general, as long as it doesn't interfere with other rules. It could be the city administrator. It could be meetings are your top priority, because any government access center is going to have a limited amount of time and capability. So you need a set of priorities in order to say, you know, this is what we will do, then this is what our next priority is, and so on and so forth. Something that says, explains when you decide to cover a committee or a commission, like under what conditions will you take on a new committee or a new commission, and under what conditions would you stop covering it. That's also good to have. Something that allows departments to have equal access, or at least a minimum amount of time that they can production time that you will give them, so that, you know, it's sort of evenly spaced. On the other hand, you might have certain departments like the Parks Department, or you know, some other department that has a higher need for outreach. Maybe you divide them into blocks or something. But I think it's important to have at the outset some kind of way to figure out how much time you're going to give each department, and how many programs you do, or what type of programs you do, so that everybody sort of has equal access to your department. Carriage of public meetings, typically a government access will do gavel to gavel. And then message boards. Sometimes message boards have looser restrictions and accept more community type programming than the government access channel itself would do. Retention of records. So in Wisconsin, if you cover a government meeting, you must keep that government meeting for 7 years. So that's in the statute, it's required, and it also has to be made available to all requesters. Your rules could also state that the city owns the copyright to all its programs, and then any underwriting sponsorship policy you might have. Okay, public access. There is, we could do a whole hour on public access rules, but I'm just going to cover like what general topics you need to cover in your policies. Your hours, when are you open, or sometimes it's by appointment. Who can use the access center? You can decide that only people within city limits can use it. You can define maybe within a certain radius of your town. You could say only adults over 18. You can set some eligibility requirements. Also, you can create standards of behavior at the facility and what is expected of producers, what is expected of the staff. You can talk about the orientation, a training program, certification. So if you want to, you can say you cannot use the editing equipment until you pass a training session on the editing equipment, or you can't use the studio until you've gone through the training. It's really up to you to decide how you want to handle that in your own town, but there should be some level of training before people are given equipment. Procedures for reserving the equipment in the facility. How much time do they get for each reservation? Sometimes centers will even say how much time they get overall to work on a project. It really depends on how strapped for time you are at your facility. Do you have the ability to give people as much time as they need, or do you have so many users that you have to draw the line? Are there any fees, and are there any penalties? There's also programming rules. So those are facility rules and programming rules. You can have technical requirements. So if somebody gives you a program and it's just, you can't hardly see it, it's dark, or the audio is really overmodulated, you don't have to accept that show. People can, you will work with a producer to reserve time on the channel. And what you have to decide is, once it plays the first time, how many more times will it play? So let's say you have a rule that says we will play it when it debuts, and then we will play the program 4 more times after that. Now that can be a minimum guarantee. You could decide you want to play that show 10 more times because you love it if you've got the time on the channel, but it could be, it's probably a good policy to stick with some kind of a set amount. The copyright in a public access station is held by the producer. But normally in a public access situation, the public access center will reserve the right to debut the program and have the right to play it as much as they want. And then the producer can use that program in whatever way they want to later. I think that's a reasonable way to deal with it. Sponsorships, can a producer have a sponsor for their show? You really want to encourage that because it brings money into the center. Maybe some of it, maybe you want to do a slight split if they get a sponsorship. You could do that. But that's typically allowed, some kind of underwriting or sponsorships. Program must be non-commercial in nature, no obscenity or other unprotected speech, and you should have some kind of community bulletin board rules. Okay, so restrictions on public access. You can charge for channel time. There's no reason why you can't. It's typically not done, but it's not that it can't be done. It could certainly be done. as mentioned earlier, you can have residence requirements, age requirements. You can move a program to a later hour if you think it violates community standards. You can say no obscenity or libel. You want to make sure that all your public access producers sign a waiver that holds you harmless from whatever content is in that public access program. I would do that for every single show. And that will help with suits. I was talking to Mike Wassenaar the other day, and he was telling me the story about when he was manager of Minneapolis Television Network, and one of his producers sued MTN because he got shot. And he got shot when he was using a camera from NTN producing a show. And his argument was he wouldn't have gotten shot if he had not been working on that show. And it was thrown out of court. But he pointed out it's a really good idea to have a producer sign a waiver, and it's also a good idea to maybe carry broadcast insurance so that, it's just called broadcast insurance. Apparently you can get it as a rider on top of municipal insurance. And if you're a nonprofit, you can just buy it. And apparently it is, the amount of, the cost of it is based on the size of your community. So it's something to consider, because you can be sued at any time. Even if you put all of these things into place and you're very careful, people will still sue. So now you could establish a more narrow mission. A public access channel does not have to be a public forum. And we could get into the Didi Halleck case a little bit here if you wanted to. But for example, you could have a tourism channel and just from the outset say, this is the kind of programming we're going to have on this channel. There's no reason why you couldn't do that. The Didi Halleck case in New York, what seems to be the case there is that a nonprofit assigned by a city to run public access is not the state. And the important thing to understand is that the First Amendment protects people against state action. The state cannot infringe your right of free speech. Private entities can, but the state cannot. And by saying that Manhattan Neighborhood Network was not a state actor, it also followed then that it could not infringe the First Amendment rights of the users. So that was what the court found. Now, if your local government, for example, is running a public access center, then a state actor is running a public access center. And in that case, you are a state actor and you can infringe the First Amendment rights of your public access users. And that is illegal. So particularly for governments that manage public access, you really need to be very careful about just staying true to the public forum ideal and resist content-based decisions. It's very important. Okay, so here's a court case that I grabbed from PowerPoint that Brian Grogan did, attorney Brian Grogan did a few years back. What kinds of restrictions can be instituted on a public access channel by a government? And so government regulation affecting First Amendment rights is allowed if it is within the constitutional power of the government, if it furthers an important or substantial government interest, if the government interest is unrelated to the suppression of speech, and if the incidental restriction on First Amendment speech is no greater than is essential to the furtherance of a substantial government interest. So that's the O'Brien test. Okay, how do you handle controversial streets? Any questions, or am I hope I'm not boring you to tears. Do I still have anybody left? Okay, all right. So, oops, didn't know I was gonna do that. Okay, first of all, the most important thing you can do to handle controversial speech is be prepared. It's too late. Once something happens, then it's too late to deal with it. So you want to be prepared for it, and the way you prepare for it is to be really active about doing outreach to the community about who you are and what you do. You know, take advantage of the ability to speak to groups, to appear before your city council, use social media, talk about your mission, talk about the idea that it's a public forum. You know, just try to do anything you can to help people understand that public forum mission. And another thing that's really important is to get those operating rules approved by your city council. Because when something rocks your community, whether it's because of an action of a public official or a local access producer, you really want to have your city council behind you. And when those rules are passed, make sure they just don't do it when they're half asleep. Make sure they understand what they're passing and what it might mean. I mean, it's better to have their eyes wide open at the start than to suddenly tell them 2 years later, well, that document you approved lets me do this. And they're like, really? So really make sure that they understand what they're signing off on. So preparedness is the biggest thing. And then once it happens, just stand by your rules. Explain how the controversial speech might meet your standards. Whether it does or not, I don't know, it depends. Extend an invitation to people who are unhappy to refute what the person is saying. So more speech, and schedule opposing viewpoints kind of nearby each other so that your viewers can see both sides of an issue. Okay, candidates for office. Again, I believe covering candidates for public office is one of the most important things a PEG channel can do. And so I really believe that both government access and public access should be covering candidates in some way. Government access, I think, has a valid reason to do it in a little bit more of a restrained way. But I think what they could easily do is a candidate forum where everyone is invited, and it's maybe organized either by the station or by like the League of Women Voters. And that way everybody has equal time, everybody is on the same level footing. Something like that I think works well. The other thing you can do is, invite them in to each talk for a half an hour or be interviewed for a half an hour to talk about their positions. But something in a very even-handed way. With public access, it's very, very important to handle requests from candidates like any other programming request so that they're not given any kind of special treatment. You also want to make sure that you don't offer one candidate a lot of perks, a lot of, production help or something, and not invite somebody else to get the same treatment, because that could be construed as participating in political activity. And if you're a nonprofit, you could lose your status for that. So you want to treat this very carefully, but the way you do that is by treating candidates for office like any other access producer. You can invite them for a sit down, to a forum, or you could even just say, we will allot, you can submit programs just like any other individual does, and we'll play your show or your ad, whatever. You can do that. Okay, how do you handle, okay, so if you've got a public official who is running for office, Typically, what government access stations do is they will end the broadcast of those shows a few weeks to a couple months before the election, so that they don't have more screen time than someone else. So if you've got a council member who has, issues with Gary or something like that, and it's on once a month, you might decide that that show ends in August, and so that during the fall, he doesn't have that extra time on your channel. You would continue to cover the public official as he conducts his duties. So when he's speaking at a meeting, or I don't know, whatever else he's doing, because let's say maybe he routinely does community, you might do like a community forum or something like that. I don't know. I mean, there might be some gray areas, but if he's doing something as a public official, then however you normally would cover him, you would do that. If it's something apart from his official duties, then you would want to stop that ahead of the election. Okay, so that's the end of my pegology section. Does anybody have any questions about PEG management? Somebody mentioned the stronger schedule thing. Does anybody, so, public access, we talk about it as first come, first serve, non-discriminatory access. And there are some public access centers that really do allow a producer to pick where they want to be on the schedule. You can do it that way. But I think also, if you want to have an arts night, or if you want to have a sports night, or church services day, or I think block programming is a great idea, because you can promote it. You can get people excited about being on that block. I don't think it's discriminatory as long as people get good program placement, so they're not relegated to, midnight. So I think that kind of thing is a good idea. Does anybody do that kind of thing? Scott? Okay, you're muted. Let's see if, do I have to unmute, ask to unmute?
The church services and some similarly themed programming like that, we tend to put together in the schedule.
Yeah.
Now, Oshkosh, on the public access side, when we have, whether it's church services or just stuff that people are submitting, if they intend to and show that they can consistently produce a program that's part of a series, we'll allow them to go ahead and pick a time slot, a regular time slot that they can promote. But if there's someone who's covering events or kind of submitting, shows that aren't on a schedule, or just doing a one-time thing, that's going to run for a certain period of time and then be done being on the air, we'll just kind of find spots for them. We'll work with them and give them spots that they might prefer. But we try not to bump regular programs like church services or regular shows that are produced in the community that are submitted on a weekly or monthly basis, so that those folks who produce series are able to promote the fact that they're on, like an appointment viewing, like you would for a network broadcast station. They can tell people, they can have their own Facebook page and promote the fact that they're on TV the same time every week. And then it's good for the channel too, obviously, that, they're, by way of promoting their own show, they're also promoting you. And then the other thing I was going to add as far as content goes was one other thing that we try to do every once in a while, maybe I think around Halloween is a good example. We will do little polls like, oh, what movie should we play tonight, or something like that, or, oh, what kind of programming do you want to see? And that gives you some interaction on your social media pages when you've got two options that you can schedule, but it kind of lets people weigh in and interact with you a little bit. and also then gives you some direction on what it is people want to see.
Great ideas. Okay, I'm noticing the time, so I'm going to just hop real quickly here. Real quickly, there's a difference between underwriting and advertising. I think for a PEG channel, it's very easy to avoid advertising. Best to go with underwriting. All you do is you acknowledge the sponsor, include a tagline or a general statement about their business, and you've got underwriting. Just avoid call to action, price comparisons and prices, qualitative or comparative language like we're better than them, any endorsements of a product. And the other thing I want to bring up here is that, again, this is for nonprofits. There's something called a qualified sponsorship activity. So this is not considered business income as long as a sponsor is recognized for like a nonprofit event. So it's unrelated business income. It's not unrelated business income. And the ASCAP. So this is very exciting. Actually, Dave Rulin from Reedsburg really was working hard on this, and several of us all wrote to ASCAP about this. But it's very clear that PEG channels are covered under the NCTA agreement. NCTA is the National Cable Television Association. It's the Cable Operator Association. So any musical programs that are licensed by ASCAP can be played on a public education and government access channel, and they're covered. That you have the right to carry that programming. So for example, choir concerts, band concerts, that's all fair game because we're a PEG channel and it's music, you can use it. There's, they say, without limitation. Love that. So yeah, so that's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing to kind of have that clear. The one thing that I want to talk a little bit though about is fair use. So we could argue that, let's say you do a feature and you have a band playing Smoke on the Water on your cable channel during this feature, that is certainly allowed. But let's say the producer of that show wants to go on and play that show, I don't know, anywhere else. Like they want to submit it for, they want to play it on their social media channel, or they want to play it at an event, or they want to distribute it in another way besides the Public Access Center, then they're going to be in trouble because just because it was produced at a PEG channel facility doesn't mean then that all of those uses are okay. So I still think that if you're dealing with a feature person who's doing a feature or person who's doing a documentary, if that is going to not only be on the cable channel but also on the internet, because the NCTA ASCAP license does not apply to the internet. If you're going to show it somewhere else like that, then you have to think about fair use. So keep that in mind. We have that ASCAP license for cable TV. We do not have it for the internet. So fair use balances the right of copyright holder with society. So you can use a portion of a copyrighted work for critiques to illustrate a point, if it's incidentally captured, if it's historic. And when you think about fair use, you think about whether or not the project was specifically designed around the material. If it wasn't, that's one thing, but if it was, then you want to question whether or not you're using it in a fair manner. You want to think about whether or not using that piece was critical, that there was no suitable substitute. This next one is interesting. whether or not it was the price of licensing it was excessive relative to the project. So again, that's something you might want to consider. Again, this is gray area. The use is no more extensive than necessary. The film project does not rely on any single source of material, and the copyright holder is identified. So that's, so then real quickly, I just want to mention there's a few, if you give me 5 extra minutes, I just wanted to show you a few stats from that I got off the internet about cable television. You'll see that cable TV is, subscribership is down. Here's 2012 on the left-hand side, here's 2020. In 2012, cable subscriptions were 88%. Actually, that includes satellite as well. Now they're down to 65.2. In the first quarter of 2020, cable subscriptions were down 3.2%. Satellite was down 14.7, a lot, and telco TV that was down 7.7. So cable actually came out the best of all those, of the 3. You get very different senses of what's going on depending upon what study you look at. But here's another report that in 2020, cable and satellite TV together shed 6 million households, a decline of 7.3. But based on that other report, that satellite is down 14.7 and cable is down 3.2. You can see that it probably means that cable's reduction was less than 7.3. The rise of cable-like streaming services such as Sling, YouTube, Hulu has not been enough to make up the difference. So it's interesting, they're including those sorts of services when they're making evaluations. And then this is interesting too. Only 1/3 of cord cutters subscribe to an over-the-top equivalent when they cut the cord. So it's almost like people are leaving television, but they're not starting up with anything new, which is interesting. So this one study said that even with cable-like streaming services factored in, cord cutting fell 4.4% last year. Here's another study that puts TV households subscribing to cable TV at 45.3%. The crazy thing is you add these all up and you get it like 85%. So I'm not quite sure what this is depending on, but my guess is that we're still hovering at about 50% for cable television, somewhere in that arena. And this is just a general observation. TV reaches far more people than other media. People were asked, how did you use media yesterday? And 84% said they turned on the television set. 58% said they turned on the radio. 55% said they used some kind of social media platform. 29% said they went on the internet and looked at the web or some application on the web. 28% said newspaper or magazines. 27% said newspapers. Another 27% said some video streaming platform that has advertising. 22% said a web page that is maintained by a broadcast television station. Here's at 22%, it's a video streaming platform with no advertising. And then we go down from there. So, you know, we're still looking at, if I go to this next one, they break it down here. Mostly we're talking broadcast, but cable TV is definitely in the mix. And it's still ranking way up there compared to all of these other ways of consuming media. So why do we still try to insist on using cable television? It's because it's still, compared to other platforms, it's still very, very popular. And then quickly, the Wisconsin issues. Video service providers do not need permission from municipalities to serve a community. Wisconsin does not have any build-out requirements, so they don't have to serve the whole community. Video service provider subscriber counts appear on the Department of Financial Institutions annual reports. That's the state of Wisconsin. And as a municipality, you can request those subscriber counts, but they are not broken down. You won't find out how many basic subscribers there are or how many HBO customers there are. It'll just be how many subscribers that video service provider has in your community. Municipalities can review video service provider records to ensure accurate payment of fees. And you can go 4 years back and recover fees that they owe you. And PEG channels must be substantially utilized under state law. We must provide 40 hours of programming each week, and 24 of those hours must be locally produced. So it doesn't talk about original or repeat programming, so it's programming. And while our statute talks about video programming and defines that, it doesn't define the simple word programming. And programming alone, not video programming, is what the substantially utilized standard is based on. So because of that, I would say certainly community bulletin boards count as programming. And that's it. So does anybody have any questions? I'll quick take 1, 2 questions. Sorry I didn't get to lighting, it just was off my intention here. Funding issues, somebody had a funding question. James, did you want to, did I cover it or do you still have a question?
As you went through this, it seemed as though that maybe that wasn't, maybe this wasn't exactly the forum to ask that in. So I will take that aside and use that on a future episode.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I mean, Wisconsinites, while our fees are down to 4%, there is revenue sharing that is supposed to make up for the lost 1. So municipalities should be getting that again this year. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to stop my screen share here. Okay. So a lot of you I can't see. So I hope this was good for you guys. Okay. All right, then. Does anybody want to say goodbye?
Thank you, Mary. We appreciate you giving your webinar today.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Mary.
Daniel.
Bye, everybody.
Thank
Good
you,
to
guys.
see you.
Thanks for letting me participate.
All right. Thanks, Daniel. Take care. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.